to Used to Sew, a podcast about sewing machines, sewing history, and sewing culture in the past and present. I am your producer and co-host, Aradia, daughter of your main host, T.R. Kelly, who is here today to talk to you about spotting sewing machines in film, seamstresses saving Seattle, and Chapter 6 of Fabricating Consumers by Andrew Gordon. This episode is mainly our part 3 to our ongoing series reading Fabricating Consumers, but there is a good 20 minutes of other interesting content to cover first. We start with TR spotting a familiar sewing machine in an unexpected movie set in Brazil. That section includes a quest for you, dear listeners. Can you help us identify these machines? Next, we head north to Seattle and back 100 years to talk about that one time Lou Gramm and an army of seamstresses rebuilt downtown. That section includes me being convinced that seamstress is code for something else. I'll leave it until the end to tell you if I was right. And then we turn back to Singer in Japan, picking up at the moment of World War II and moving onwards to the Cold War. We didn't get to everything on TR's list this week, but who are we to complain when the content is even denser than anticipated?
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Used to Sew, about sewing machines, sewing culture, sewing history. We stitch the world together. That's right. And I want to start off today with telling you I've done absolutely nothing with sewing machines for the past 2 weeks, and I have a pile of jeans and other items that are other people's that are saying, sew me, fix me. And sometimes I just don't want to look at a sewing machine. You ever feel that way? Of course you don't.
Every hobby has its days where you just don't want to see it.
You know, and for me right now, it's because I'm very much in transition with where do I live? We're building a cabin over on the other side of the mountains. Right now I'm on this side of the mountains. There's been shows and just all kinds of things going on, and there's just nowhere to unpack and set out a project and make it go. It's like so that's really why I haven't wanted to, because I have a lot of people from my planet. I have a hard time starting and stopping a project. So if I get it all set up and then I've got to stop and put it away again, the frustration just outweighs.
Absolutely.
That's why we need sewing rooms. You know, that's sewing rooms and she sheds. She sheds are a thing now. And gosh, wouldn't you know it? All these pictures of she sheds online, there's sewing machines in a lot of them.
Shocked, I say.
Yes. I had a great idea. So even though we're building this little cabin and I have my half, it's my sewing room. The other night we were out there looking across the sea of sagebrush, and I thought, yeah, I need my own little space out there somewhere. We got 30 acres, plenty of room. What kind of little, sea of sagebrush. Yeah, how about a sailboat? Knock the keel off, put it out there, and I could raise sails for shade, right?
You could cosplay as a shipwrecked on a desert island without any ocean.
Yeah, because a lot of people call that area out there the Sagebrush Sea. So I was in a creative frame of mind. So then I got to thinking about, I could buy a derelict sailboat probably for $1,000. Doesn't have to float. None of the shit has to work. It just has to be a good hull with all the, the little interior cubbies and beds and place to put a sewing machine. And the idea of sails. Ooh, they don't have to be strong enough to actually move the boat through the sagebrush sea. So that kind of gives me a lot of artistic freedom. But like I've said before, there are no trees on my property, 30 acres of sagebrush. There's no shade. So a sailboat comes with its own little shade cloths, right?
Yeah, and you can reorient them to track the sun.
Yes, absolutely. And I could be swilling rum and singing yo ho ho.
This is a very cool post-apocalyptic photo shoot opportunity.
Absolutely. So if anybody in Central Oregon happens to have a derelict sailboat in their front yard they want to get rid of, yeah, give me a call. So that was, a place to sew, a place to do your hobbies, store your fabric. I don't have that much, but being able to look at it and see it. I don't like drawers. I know you're like this too. In the sewing room out at your house, we've got clear things and we can see all the stuff because out of sight,
out of mind.
Yep. Oh, I forgot about this project. Oh, where you can see sewing machines. I just want to switch over to one of our other ongoing threads here, which is sewing machines in movies. In the weirdest places. Okay, this is going to be such a right angle corkscrew left-hand thread rabbit hole. You're going to stay with me on this.
All right, I'm strapping my seatbelt in, taking my Dramamine.
Mm-hmm. We are going far, far away. We're going, okay. We're going to the 80s in Brazil.
Okay, 2 places I have never been.
Yeah, okay. I'm interested in a whole lot of stuff. And so I just tend to put on my YouTube and get a playlist of, I want to hear about this today. So I was into, radioactive accidents. Everybody knows about Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island. There's another one that's called the Goiânia incident, and it's where a radiotherapy cesium-137 cancer X-ray shooting machine. I don't know the right term for it. The hospital was abandoned. The machine was left behind. Scrappers found it, didn't know what it was, took it home, busted it open, basically poisoned an entire neighborhood with cesium-137.
Oh, wow. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, this is a true story. And several movies have been made about it, but I happened on to an actual Brazilian movie. It is so realistic and gritty. It's in Portuguese, no subtitles. If I didn't know the story of what happened, I wouldn't have known what was going on. But I watched it on silent for a while, but then I turned it up because I like to hear people talking, especially if I can't understand them, because then it's just nice people talking, but I don't have to,
Right, and you can get a lot just from intonation,
Yeah.
paired with body language.
Yes.
Like you get a vibe. Oh, these people are upset. Oh, these people are talking about a ticking time bomb situation. Oh, these people are whatever.
Yeah. So this is a really poor, lower working class neighborhood in, I can't remember outside of which city, but Goiânia is the name of the suburb. And the sets are all they're just there. They're just filming. There are no sets. They're filming in where this happened.
On site, on location.
Oh, it's so gritty. And if you like vintage old stuff, of course, which, they're what they're wearing, everybody's smoking. Hardly anybody has a car. This scrapyard, people are just doing their stuff. So I'm just sitting there and I'm kind of farting around. All of a sudden I hear a sewing machine in the movie. Hey, whoa, wait, what? Pause. Okay, so here's one of the pair of the main characters, husband and wife, and they're sitting in their living room and he's soldering something. He's working on a thing and she's sewing. She's got her machine set up and the person's actually sewing. This is like not fake. She's got pieces all set out.
Right, this person actually has enough competency at sewing to do it on camera for repeated takes. And
it's in the living rooms. This is a small house. So he's actually soldering his thing on the end of her ironing board. They're all kind of packed into this little living room there.
It's one workroom, multiple works.
Yeah. And he all of a sudden he feels sick and he goes and sits down on the couch and, he's get the beginnings of radiation sickness is what's happening. But then she's sitting there at the machine and I'm trying, of course, oh, geez, the guy's sick. What a bummer. What kind of machine is it?
What machine is it?
And it looks vaguely familiar. They show a few more shot of her. If you want to, I'll tell you about this movie. We'll put a link up with times and stuff because you guys have an assignment on this. So the next shot is looking at her and we're seeing the back of the sewing machine and it says Singer. What machine is this?
A Quest.
It's a Quest. And I took a still out of the movie and I just don't know. It's definitely an 80s looking frame. I can't tell if it's a top drop in or a thing underneath, but we're going to post the picture and you guys are going to tell us what machine is this. Now, Singer had a factory in Brazil. I knew this before because in the 80s I was selling the model 6215C and 6212C. And C is for Campesina, which is the factory in Brazil.
Okay.
Campina. It's in Campinas, near Sao Paulo, Brazil. That factory was opened in 1955. Machines from that factory start with the letter R. RA, RB, RC, all the way up through RY on the serial numbers. This machine, the reason it looked familiar, I think it might have been one of those machines I was selling. It looks like a 6215, but not quite. So maybe they were making some machines that were they weren't for the United States or whatever. Don't know.
Right, they weren't export grade. They were being sold in country domestically, but they were still being made from the same templates, the same machines, all that.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, and I couldn't if I could have gotten a look at the face of it, but I could only see it from the side, like what knobs and stuff are on there. Okay, and so if that wasn't enough, okay, that's at 40 minutes into the movie is the Singer machine. At 1 hour and 2 minutes into the movie, we're at the house of another couple, same setup. They're in their living room. He's watching TV. She's sewing. This is just like, all right.
It's just how life is at that point.
It is. It's a whole different character, but they've got the same, she's sewing and he's working on something else. Her sewing machine is not a Singer. I look at it and it's like, wow, there's 2 knobs on top there. Nope, don't know what that one is. I have a picture of that one too, if anybody knows what that one is. But the fact that there's 2 different sewing machines aren't even part of the plot. They're just part of the fabric of these people's lives.
It's just flavor text and set dressing. And
yeah, this is what people do.
Building the characters.
Yeah, these are working class women, and they're sewing. I think it was the second one. You can see that her project looks like a dress, the pieces that are cut out. But in this weird, offbeat, Brazilian-produced movie that I just happen to be watching because I have...
About a human-made disaster.
Yeah, I have an interest in these, things, and all of a sudden when I heard that Singer sewing machine, it was like... It's like, I know that sound. The second machine, we hear it sewing as well, but I don't recognize the sound of it either.
Recognize that it is a sewing machine.
Yeah.
But that's not it.
So the name of the movie is Sessio. I don't know how to say 137 in Portuguese, but we'll put a link to it in there. And if you can look at those machines and if you have any idea what models those are, it's just a small thing, but it would mean a lot to us if you would tell us.
Yeah. Any amount of information about Brazilian sewing machine distribution in that time, any rabbit holes you want to offer us, we will happily gobble, 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 gobble.
The fact that I remember selling machines that looked very similar and, that whole factory, that when we get to an episode on Singer's global factories, we'll go with that one. 1955. Wow.
Fascinating. Cool. Nice find out there in the wild.
Oh, that was, keep an eye out for sewing machines in movies.
Yeah, there's a new season of Silo coming out at some point. I've seen the trailer for it. And in that, there was one of the sets where there's just a wall of sewing machine carcasses. I've told you about it. I think I told you about it on a recording. But it's a post-apocalyptic scenario, and there's a workroom with, the crazy old mechanic and all of the carcasses that they've collected over the many, many years.
Wow.
And one of them is just a wall of sewing machine carcasses. Has nothing to do with the plot. There is no sewing being depicted that I recall.
But they're in there.
When season 3 comes out, I'm going to be very eagerly looking to see any more scenes in that workshop to be like, okay, can I tell now, are they all Singer carcasses? Is there a wide variety of carcasses? Before I just saw the sewing machine nature. Now I'm like, okay, when I watch the next season, am I going to be able to tell from the profiles just kind of what was there?
Right. And if this machine in this movie that I was looking at hadn't said Singer across the back, I still would have known it. The shape is very distinctive of those 80s machines, so.
Right.
Pretty weird. So yeah, if you find one, Mississippi Burning, which is a civil rights movie with Gene Hackman, there's one fleeting shot of one of the bad guys sewing on a Singer 29K cobbler machine. He's working on shoes. What a weird thing. What a weird thing to have in the movie.
I figure it just has to do with what kinds of special interests the set designers have elsewhere in their lives, You just never know what kind of information and props a given person involved in that is going to have to bring to bear on creating that flavor text,
Since that movie was based on a true story, that might have actually been part of that character's thing, that he worked at a cobbler shop. I don't know enough about the whole thing, but it's the civil rights 1965, pretty intense movie. But it's like, what a weird place to see a sewing machine. And of course, 29K, I know that one.
They're everywhere.
It's so funny how Portuguese and Spanish are supposed to be really close. I couldn't pick up any of it. If it had been in Spanish, I would have been able to follow along.
Yeah, I was wondering. I almost said something about like, well, you should have been able to pick up some, but then you didn't say anything about this.
No.
Like, no, maybe not.
No.
Maybe not. Your ear, well, because your ear for Spanish is very Mexican Spanish. It's not Iberian Spanish. You've been picking it all up through the spoken language of like radio and music people in Mexico.
Yeah, which is all different than Brazilian Spanish is different than Castilian Spanish.
Yeah, exactly. Like you learn by mimicry, and you have not been mimicking anything close to what Brazilian is coming off of.
No.
Brazilian Portuguese.
I'm very much California and Arizona Spanish is what I hear. Which is also it's Cinco de Mayo today, which is a Chicano holiday, which is Mexican American. The Mexicans do not celebrate Cinco de Mayo. Strictly Mexican American holiday. And don't call it Cinco de Gringo. Just don't, because don't be a stupid gringo.
No. And it's not Mexican Independence Day. It's not.
No, it's not. That's in September.
Yes, there is a Mexican Independence Day, and this is it.
Cinco de Mayo celebrates the winning of the Battle of Puebla, which was in the Mexican-American War. And I don't quite remember why Chicanos in Southern California adopted it as a holiday in the 50s, I think. I have to do more research on that. Yeah, the Portuguese, I was surprised that, okay, it's different in Spanish, and also it's like, okay, it's probably different than Portuguese in Portugal, too.
Yeah, no, precisely. It's colonial separation and evolution, plus you've got all the loan words that come in from the indigenous and African languages that are coming through during this. So all the loan words and pronunciations, things like all those rules are different from how the Spanish did Mexico, California.
Yeah, and if you look, the people that are in the movie, which are all just regional people, they're beautifully quad racial. They're Brazilians. Brazilians just have a look. They have so much different heritage. If you're really just interested in looking at how a place was, the filming of this thing, like I said, I didn't understand any of it, but it was really cool. So let's go from Brazil to Seattle.
Hey!
Bluest skies you ever seen are in Seattle. Silly theme song from an old show. We have a friend in Seattle, Patricia May Anthony. She's been sending us cool little bits and bobs. And one of the letters she sent me recently was, I was listening intently to your podcast about the Singer installment plans and the comments about present-day credit being rooted in those plans. I did some rando reading, and it seems like the contracts were made with the woman and that she did not need her husband's signature? ?
Feminist icons? Credit cards?
I was looking for more information on that, and I don't know. But I would say that probably that could be true, because why? It's an easily repossessed thing, for one thing.
Right.
Right? And the man is going to be making all the financial decisions. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. So that's another rabbit hole. Like, okay, they invented credit, but were they the first people to extend credit to women?
That is an interesting question.
Interesting question. And then this is really fun. So this is Patricia again. One of my favorite pieces of history about sewing machines. And then she puts a link in here. And this is actually a link to Fulcrum Coffee Roasters in Seattle. It's like, what?
Okay.
So they're talking about, this is our Sunset Blend created in 1988. And then they go on to tell the story of where they got the idea for this or something. At one time, our proclivity for sin played a hand in disaster. Talking about Seattle here.
Okay.
1889. A fire that started in a woodworking shop had the good fortune to find itself surrounded by liquor stores and saloons. Fueled by massive amounts of alcohol, that fire went on to destroy Seattle. Downtown was lost. 29 city blocks leveled. Seattle saw the ashes as a blank canvas for bold moves. That's the coffee The old city still exists, buried beneath the Seattle we know today. We rebuilt stronger, higher, and spared no expense. In the year after the fire, the city's population nearly doubled thanks to the scale of construction being done and the workers required to do it. But at the same time, the city was quickly going broke. Infrastructure is necessary but not free. A census was organized to uncover just how many new residents the town had and how they might pay for the raised streets and functional plumbing. The influx of construction workers came as no surprise to anyone. The accompanying influx of seamstresses was more of a head-scratcher. According to the census, in a town of 40,000 people, mostly men, there were about 2,700 seamstresses. Interestingly, the vast majority of those working women all lived on the same street in Pioneer Square. Seattle was not famous for having a garment district, so the city sent out a few volunteers to investigate. Believe it or not, they didn't turn up a single sewing machine.
I have a guess about what seamstress is code for.
Imagine nearly 3,000 seamstresses and not one sewing machine between them. They were, however, making astonishing profits. The head seamstress, a German-born entrepreneur by the name of Lou Graham, ran the finest sewing circle in town, catering to the upper echelon of Seattle society. She was also one of the most prosperous women of her time, a skilled businesswoman and investor. Lou Graham and the city council came to an agreement. Seattle's seamstresses would help pay to rebuild their city at a rate of $10 per week. This sewing machine tax would restock the city's depleted coffers and in return earn the seamstresses a blind eye from the police as they peddled their craft.
Seamstresses.
Lou Graham and the working women of Pioneer Square helped Seattle rise from the ashes of the worst time in its history. If Graham was thanked for saving the city's elite, and some say the bank itself, from bankruptcy, amid the panic of 1893, it was all done quietly. She wasn't interested in the spotlight. After all, Seattle's heart does beat loudest after the sun sets.
The nod and a wink. Oh my God.
So this is on this coffee page. So I went and looked up more about this story, and it's indeed true. This Lou Graham was her sewing circle only catered to the elite, and all of her seamstresses had to be well versed in cultural things, and so it was a top end sewing club. That is such a cool story.
So this isn't a euphemism. This is actual sewing.
Well, that's how they got it through.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Patricia, for that really fun story, because that leads me to another rabbit hole that we're going to get to, which is Seattle. Seattle really became big time during the Klondike Gold Rush, and that happened in 1897 when a steamship from Alaska pulled in from the Klondike region with a ton of gold on board. And then there was one of the biggest gold rushes in history. What did they do about shirts? Who did their sewing? Were there sewing machines in Dawson City? We know there were lots of seamstresses. So stay tuned. Stay tuned for Seattle and seamstresses and the gold rush and sewing machines in the Great White North. We'll get to that in the future. Chapter 6 from the book Fabricating Consumers, The Sewing Machine in Modern Japan. This book has been really thick. It's an academic book, and I've just been trying to get through the parts that I'm not so interested in and get to the parts I am interested in, which was how did Japanese sewing machines beat Singer? So we've gone through the whole thing of Singer. You can listen to part 1 and part 2, where we talk about how Singer got to Japan and how they integrated themselves into the very different world of Japanese sewing versus Western sewing. So they're kind of a driver for a lot of cultural things, but they're also very socially important because now women have more power. Anyway, the book is huge. And this part is going to lead us down to a rabbit hole of sergers later. But like they came from Japan. Why? Anyway, a lot of times here in the US when we think of Japan, we still compare things with how many Hiroshima-sized bombs that would have been. So there's this always will be this little scar between Japan and the US about the atomic bombing. We're going to read Chapter 6, The Mechanical Phoenix. This is from Fabricating Consumers, The Sewing Machine in Modern Japan by Andrew Gordon. Among many stories marking the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II, the Asahi, in August 1995, that's a magazine, ran a feature on reporters who told the story of the atomic bomb. It focused on Kusakabe Hisahiro, the Nagasaki bureau chief of its competitor paper. Kusakabe lived with his wife, Toshiko, in an apartment behind the paper's office, sufficiently distant from the epicenter of the bomb for the two of them to survive by diving into their air raid shelter just as the blast blew off the office roof. 50 years later, Kusakabe vividly recalled his frustration at the censorship that prevented him and his colleagues from publishing a detailed account of the damage and suffering. He also recalled venturing out with his wife to look for her mother, who lived closer to the epicenter. Amid the destruction, they could not tell exactly where her house had been. Guessing maybe here, we started digging through the rubble and soon came upon the familiar Singer sewing machine. Pushing further through the ashes, we found a finger with a gold ring on it. My wife said, "This is my mother's." Kusakabe gathered the burnt remains and put them into his metal helmet. The sewing machine does not figure this prominently or wrenchingly in every collection of war survival and loss, but neither is its appearance surprising. The sewing machine was already an emblem of middle-class life in the interwar era and wartime. By the 1960s, it would find its way into the great majority of all Japanese homes. But in sharp contrast to pre-war times, Singer machines accounted for a minor share of post-war purchases. This chapter explores the process by which Japanese producers came to dominate their home and world markets, and Singer's frustrated attempt to regain its dominant position.
So before the war, Singer was the icon of what sewing machines were in Japan, and post-war, they were struggling and losing to maintain that position as Japanese manufacturers were like, no, hold our sake.
So I'm trying to skip over. I didn't want to mark up the book with a highlighter here, so I'm trying to just...
Sticky notes are really good for pages because they come off really easy. They don't really adhere to paper really aggressively. They come off super easy. They don't damage the paper or anything.
That's a good idea. I've seen that. Okay.
Yeah. I tried it I've tried it with many books and I haven't had any damage to the pages as a result. Like obviously textbooks are very glossy, but I've even tried it with regular books and there's no harm to the text. So you could do that.
Yeah, this is a very quality book, the binding and the paper and everything. Okay. Mrs. Kusakabe's family sewing machine was one of many thousands ruined in the rain of fire and atomic bombing in the war's final year. The Japan Sewing Machine Industry Association estimated that more than half of the nation's stock of household machines, so 800,000, had been destroyed. As a result, the ownership rate fell from nearly 1 in 10 to 1 in every 24 homes.
Sure. Yeah.
Wow.
That's how math works. But wow, that's not a casualty I usually think of when I think of the war. I think of, people's homes and lives. I didn't think about I had never thought about the position of the sewing machine at all until we got into this book, but much less how that loss would have had a long-term effect on the families that did live.
Especially in Japan, because as we've learned earlier in the book, they don't really have a ready-to-wear scene at all. The women do all their sewing at home. And the only people that get ready to wear are men, because there are tailors, because they have to wear certain uniforms for work and such. So a lot of women had made sewing economically, like they work on that stuff. So all of a sudden, not only can you not take care of your own family, you can't do the work you were doing. From this devastated landscape, the sewing machine emerged as both a mechanical chameleon and a phoenix. as a chameleon, whether in marketing slogans in the view of the Japanese government and American occupation authorities, or to the actual uses to which it was put. The machine in autumn of 1945 quickly changed colors from home front weapon to implement of peace. As a phoenix, it rose with astonishing speed to play an important role in the recovery of Japanese machine industry in export and domestic markets. 2 years after the war, in 1947, Japanese companies manufactured 134,000 household machines, followed by 166,000 the next year, making it one of the first industries to surpass its peak of pre-war output. So they're making more.
Wow. They just took a huge kick in the kneecaps and then used that to become like the best jumper ever.
Like we've lost half our sewing machines. So they put a lot of effort into getting them going again. Now this is not Singer. This is Japanese companies.
Right. These are companies that have the Singer model, they have the Singer experience, but they're doing it themselves, not as a Singer franchise. And we're into the class 15s being the mother of all clones?
No.
No, this
No.
is before that.
Yeah, this is going to get interwoven in here.
Okay.
So the Japanese, they had been copying features of not only Singer, but of the German machines too before. So they had some of their own stuff going on.
Right. This isn't the first time a generation of sewing machines has been absolutely decimated in Japan. We had that whole thing with the German machines getting just smashed literally by Singer as a trade-in program.
Yep.
They've got 2 generations of we've learned, but we now have to innovate and grow on our own.
Yeah. Production of household machines, as counted by the Industry Association, approached 500,000 units in 1950. Output doubled the following year, blah, 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 peaked at 4.3 million machines in 1969. Whew. That's per year.
That's so many machines. And so this means that even as elsewhere in the West, culturally, the desire to sew is going down, and sewing machine sales are going down, and people's interest in passing that skill on is going down. That is not true in Japan.
No.
The average housewife young woman is like absolutely devoted to, oh yeah, I sew. I'm going to be sewing. Sewing is a thing. This is not at all trending downwards in popularity as an activity.
No. Not just the sewing, but the making of the machines. The Japanese, it's if you look up all caps, the Japanese economic miracle with the post-war thing.
Oh, right, of course, because exports.
Right.
Because exports. Right.
Here now, in 1955, the value of sewing machine exports, $38 million, was the greatest of any product in the light machinery category and easily exceeded the combined export sales of the next 4 goods on the list: cameras, radios, bicycles, and binoculars. So sewing machines were beating all that.
Including their old twin, the bicycle.
By 1957, 1 million out of 1.6 million sewing machines imported into the U.S. were made in Japan. As Fortune magazine put it in 1959, Mighty Singer was struggling to defend itself in the face of really alarming competition of some 300 Japanese sewing machine companies. Japan had become the world's leading producer of sewing machines. Wow.
And those 300 companies were not fighting harder with each other than with foreign markets. They were fine, all 300, taking on giants like Singer. Wow.
The majority of this output was sold overseas. Official statistics report that nearly 70% of household machines made in Japan from 1948 through 1960 were exported. So of all the machines made, 70% in that 12 years were exported. But as government officials themselves recognized, their data significantly undercounted domestic sales in the first post-war decade. Exports were precisely tabulated by the finance ministry, but machines sold on the domestic market by numerous large and small producers were not fully counted.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. A survey by the Ministry of International Trade and Industry estimated that the total statistics on sewing machine production missed nearly half of the output in 1947 to 48, and it goes on with each year. If one accepts all these numbers, cumulative domestic sales by 1960 stood at 5.5 million sewing machines. Woo! So they go on and do a lot more number stuff. Janome, which is one of the producers, Janome's customer magazine, found a sewing machine in 75.5% of urban households. In 1960, 72% of all 20 million households nationwide in Japan possessed a sewing machine, making it the second most widely owned consumer machine after the radio and well ahead of the television. Oh,
That's quite incredible. I mean, it makes sense given that the sewing machine's useful and TV is not, and you've already got radio for all the important communication, but still, take that.
Now, here we're running into the same problem as everywhere else. Household penetration slowed in the 60s. It took until 1967 for the sewing machine to find its way into 80% of homes. Like refrigerators or washing machines, but unlike TVs or radios, this was an item generally limited to one per household. Right? Once you have one.
Right.
So, market saturation. New models, such as the zigzag machine, introduced in Japan in the 1950s, encouraged trade-ins and upgrades, but the golden age of household sales for domestic sewing machine market lasted only 2 decades. The great irony in this impressive record of manufacturing sales is evident in the record of the Singer Company. Not for lack of interest or effort, during the post-war decades, Singer never won back more than 15% of the Japanese market. It lost to Japanese competition around the world as well. But if Singer failed to regain even a shadow of its former dominance in Japan, its machine selling system still cast a large shadow. Its effort to re-enter the Japanese market and defend its place at home constituted an early episode in several decades of trade conflict. Its selling system in Japan served as a model not only for the sewing machine industry, but also now for a wider range of consumer goods. This remade everyday life and fostered a powerful new version of demand-driven economy. In this system's marketing appeals and selling strategies, in particular, the offer of consumer credit, women held a proud place as happy consumers and prudent home managers. Remember, that's how they're selling the sewing machine early on, is you're a prudent, good Japanese housewife. You know, this is not frivolous.
Right. Was that chameleon act I was talking about before? Is it used to be for the war effort, and now, without missing a beat, it's for the peace effort. It's still the same message.
This is the part that I have been waiting for. Embattled producers, Singer versus Japan.
Fight!
The point of origin for Japan's post-war sewing machine industry were 3. A small number of manufacturers already established in the 1930s, a larger number of new entrants, and several conversion manufacturers such as Tokyo Heavy Machinery, reborn as Juki. This last group shifted from producing weapons and precision machinery for the military to the making of machine in the peacetime economy. Turning their production technology towards sewing machines was a logical step. The small-scale network-based organization of production in this fast-growing industry differed from Singer's, which made most of its parts in-house. That vertical integration thing, right? Half the companies surveyed by the Japanese Industry Association in 1956, so they're talking about how poor they were. Not really poor, but how they weren't Singer. The industry in the late 50s consisted of 15 major producers of finished machines with assembly plants. So basically 15 factories. They subcontracted and purchased parts from a larger network of at least 65 principal suppliers. Organized in this fashion, Japan's sewing machine industry constituted a network-based system of parts suppliers and assembly finishers. Constantly preparing for the day when mighty Singer might return to Japan, the goal of these producers was to match Singer's quality. Faced with the need to standardize machine parts produced by multiple firms, the industry took Singer's machines as its models, provoking strong criticism from Singer for copying its parts, using its model numbers, and infringing on its trademarks. Japanese producers ignored these complaints, and in 1949 they set Singer-derived industry standards for their products, noting their cost-effectiveness and flexibility in allowing the end producers to adapt to changing market conditions. Kubahara Tetsuya has attributed the success of the Japanese firms to the networked assembly system. The machine producers were among the pioneers in what has become to be enshrined as a Japanese innovation in mass production. So they're not vertically integrated like Singer. Like this guy over here just makes motors, and this guy over here just makes the drive shafts. And so these 15 factories are buying their parts and putting them together however they want. See how that works? Whole different deal.
Yeah, and then they're able to much more easily distribute the responsibility for the IP theft, both the work and the legal culpability. They're able to distribute that out to the point that it's easy to just be like, when Singer complains. Like the responsibility chain is also not vertically integrated.
Right.
They can just kind of mix and match and say, well, look, your standards are great. Who are we to complain if all of our suppliers like copying your standards? It's a compliment, really.
As early as 1950, in the case of the Brother Company and the Pine Sewing Machine Company, Japanese executives and engineers paid visits to the famed Singer factory in Elizabethport, New Jersey. They were astonished to discover that Singer no longer had much to teach them. These were among the first in a series of revelatory American sojourns by visiting Japanese engineers from all manner of industries in the 50s and 60s.
Wow.
One of the Yasui brothers recalled of his 1950 visit that my host, the American factory director, guided me through the armhead, casting, parts, and assembly plants, but to be honest, in contrast to the immensity of the building, there was not much to surprise me about the facilities inside. The Pine engineer, whose company was eventually absorbed by Singer as part of its re-entry strategy in Japan, recalled that I gained a lot of confidence in discovering that in the previous 10 years, our own company's technology division had developed to the level of Singer with its history of more than 100 years. So we took what you did and we refined it really well.
Yeah, they built on the shoulders of giants. They're not denying that, but also they optimized and efficientized really fast and well compared to the giants on whose shoulders they were standing. Like both things are true.
Yeah. Although it organized production differently than Singer and to good effect in both production, design, and sales strategy, Japan's domestic sewing machine industry closely tracked the pre-war giants' footsteps, listening all the while for the footfalls of Singer's return to the home market. Although it organized production differently from Singer and to good effect in both production, design, and sales strategy, Japan's sewing machine industry closely tracked the pre-war giants' footsteps, listening all the while for the footfalls of a Singer return to the home market. From its first issue in November of 1946, the pages of Japanese Sewing Machine Times overflowed with complaints at the low quality of Japanese machines, called for industry-wide standardization of parts, defensive denials that Japanese manufacturers were stealing Singer technology, infringing its patents, all with the fearful reports that Singer was coming back and about to re-enter the Japanese market. Although Singer was indeed already interested in the Japanese market, the post-war rumors of its return were premature, and the denials of infringement ran more than a little hollow. A chart of all the new model numbers for parts set up by the Ministry of Commerce under the headline, "The use of Singer model names and parts is prohibited." It wraps up the ad with, "Let's take care not to violate this." Clearly, many manufacturers were not only copying Singer parts, but even using Singer's part numbers and model names to
Okay,
signal.
see, that's a little bit low class. You're supposed to file the serial numbers off. That's like the whole point.
Despite exhortations to follow the new rules from the 1948 issue of the Japanese Sewing Machine Times itself was helping the cause of cloning machines in articles detailing the features of roughly 200 Singer models already in use in Japan. From 1949 and 1950, this paper published dozens of articles presenting diagrams and technical specifications of Singer machines and parts, along with their patents. This paper called it an effort to educate makers to respect patents, but equally offered the possibility of making copies based on the diagram.
This is so blatant. They're like, wink, wink, don't do this very specific thing. It sure would be a shame if you did this and made a lot of money, because Singer would be real mad if you did it. You'd make a lot of money. You'd make so much money, Singer would be mad at you. Sure shouldn't do that. Like, that's so blatant. So is the reason that the mother of all clones exists because Singer wanted to like leave with some of their dignity intact? Is that essentially why that happened? Like, we'll legalize it so that way we're not just having our IP completely thrown at our faces.
Well, it's even more basic than that. So here's more pages about all the different claims that, Singer's, everybody's just copying right and left. It's definitely whack-a-mole here, and even copying the decals even.
Oh my God. So blatant.
In 1952, Singer returned to Japan. The Japan Sewing Machine Times opened a front page editorial that June in a foreboding tone. It seems the inevitable has finally happened. Singer is starting to sell household machines. The previous week, the paper had reported the rumors were correct. Singer had reconstituted a portion of its old network of shop managers, contracting with 60 stores to serve as authorized distributors. In Japan, Singer's shift from exclusive reliance on company shops to selling as well through authorized dealers. Okay, so in 1952, this is happening in the United States too. Singer's lacking a sufficient presence to open its own shops. In a sign of further flexibility, Singer was also reportedly going to place its machines alongside other domestic makes at major department stores. Ooh, the reaction of domestic producers is said to be appropriately calm for the short run. Singer would be importing at most 1,000 machines a month at a time when Japanese producers were selling at least 40 times that number. But here's the deal. Singer also triple the cost of a domestic triple the cost of a Japanese machine. Sales were expected to be modest, but over the long run, both newspaper and its industry readers were worried. Once Singer reconstituted its famed selling system and secured a foothold in department stores, the combination of brand reputation, product quality, comprehensive service, and installment credit meant that monthly sales might rise from 1,000 to 10,000 or more. In the event, these fears proved groundless. Then it goes on to say how many that they sold. The problem, it seems clear, lay in the double punch of Singer's high price and the growing quality of machines made in Japan. Singer soon decided that the only way to confront its new competition, not only in Japan but in other Asian markets, would be to produce in Japan. Reports began appearing in the industry press. In 1953, Singer was looking for a partner to undertake local production.
If you can't beat them, join them.
So Singer takes a 50% ownership in Pine Sewing Machine Company and starts a factory in Utsunomiya, northwest of Tokyo. That plant is still there. I sold machines made there. A lot of people are like foaming out about that because how dare we, it's like a mixed marriage or something.
Right. You're going to let this company come in and be here. Not just be an importee, but like be here.
Okay. But fearing the machines would fall short of Singer quality and standards, Singer was at first unwilling to sell these new machines under its own name. In November 1955, as an interim measure, the Pine factory began to produce 1,500 Merit sewing machines per month for Singer. The brand came from Isaac M. Singer's middle name. Singer sold these machines through a network of non-exclusive outlets. So basically it's going on with, why do people even want to buy a Singer when they can buy one of their own machines that's just as good now?
Right. That's the thing, is it doesn't take many Singer sales for people to realize, oh, these are not significantly better than our homemade machines. These are not actually worth triple the price. They're literally the same, if not inferior.
Yeah. Within a year of investment in the Pine factory, Singer reported that much has been accomplished in the task of retooling the factory. Satisfied as to the quality of the product, Singer shifted from the Merit to the more powerful Singer brand name, increased the number of retail stores, and began to lure customers with his tried and true techniques of direct selling, easy payments, and free lessons. By 1959, Pine was producing more than 70,000 machines for Singer at the Utsunomiya plant, and Singer was exporting thousands of these to other Asian countries. So check it out. Singer's making machines in Japan and exporting them to other countries, not back to the U.S., right?
It makes sense. I mean, that's what Singer has been doing, right? Like, you build the factory closer to the market you're trying to capture. If they're trying to capture the Asian market, have a factory in Asia. That totally makes sense. They were kind of being slow to get to it, really, if you think about it. But also they're being goaded into it by the success of the Japanese manufacturers. That's also, like, maybe more actually what's happening.
Yeah. So, okay, this is, we're writing up some social stuff here about this. In the epilogue to his important book on racism in the Pacific War, John Dower asks, after such a merciless war, how could the race hatred dissipate so quickly? He answers that in addition to the simple in-person discovery that their former enemies were neither demons nor brutes, the stereotypes which fed super-patriotism and outright race hate were adaptable to cooperation. As Dower contends, the malleability of America's image of Japan transformed from sneaky to cute, and Japan's demonic image of Americans, shifting shape from destructive to protective, probably did contribute to this reconciliation. But this interpretation overlooks the power of subliminal hatreds of wartime, now displayed on economic and cultural grounds. The warlike and feverish nationalism that greeted the Singer-Pine proposal offers a glimpse of the enduring force of earlier fear and enmity. Customers were told to be loyal and buy Japanese. Producers called on the state to protect ethnic industry. Singer was described in ferocious tones as a predatory invader.
Makes sense. That totally makes sense. That stuff does not go away with the flick of a government switch. It just morphs.
Yeah. Though America's trade policy was considerably more liberal than Japan's, economic nationalism on the American side of the Pacific was similarly harsh. The United States maintained a considerable trade surplus with Japan in the 1950s, but current complaints at Japan's traditional tendency to dump poor quality products on world markets ran strong and steady. I remember this from being a little kid. Made in Japan was not good. It was cheap. Now, made in Japan, it's like, oh, that's good stuff. But back then, it was like, no, it's made in Japan. It's not real American. You know, whatever. Is this radio any good? No, it's made in Japan.
I remember noticing that as an oddity in the Back to the Future series.
Yeah.
I think in the third one, the cowboy one.
Yeah.
The Old West one. There's a moment where Marty is like, oh, well, the doohickey's made in Japan. And Doc looks at him and is like, oh, it's made in Japan. Because, of course, they come from different generations with respect to Japanese manufacturing. And I didn't get it.
I forgot about that.
Because I come from a post-Marty McFly world where like, Japan is the source of good radios. And I was like, why would Doc say that? And you had to explain it to me that in between those two guys' like, you know, youths, the state of Japanese manufacturing changed. I literally learned it from those movies. And you explaining the joke in the movie.
Wow. I forgot about that, but yeah.
It's a very vivid memory to me.
So here's the whole key. The saga of Singer's return to Japan and Japan's machine exports to the United States reveals at the level of discourse both ongoing elements and shifting patterns of trade war talk. Echoes of 1930s criticisms of cheap labor mixed with the vocabulary of war had been clear in the occupation area statements of Singer's management. But one element in American trade talk was new: the call to accept Japanese imports in the interest of strengthening a Cold War ally.
Oh.
The fear that Japan might suddenly go red was always present. As the Saturday Evening Post put it in 1952, the containment of Russia and its satellites can't be had without a price. That price being Japan's access to the American market. So we propped up their economy. We bought their stuff. A lot of their stuff.
There it is.
We didn't sue them.
There's the real key.
Yep. In addition, a gradual shift came with recognition in some quarters of Japan that protection was no longer needed, and with admission on the American side that high Japanese quality as well as lower cost was part of the problem. Among Singer executives, the scornful assumption that Japanese manufacturers produced inferior goods through unscrupulous means had vanished by the time the company decided to make product in Japan. Ahead of its competitors in this regard, Singer, well aware that its future as well as its past lay in the ability to sell not at home but worldwide, was also among the earliest firms to push more for a reciprocal access in Japan than for protection at home. So Singer's like, let's go global with this, guys.
Yeah, which is what they were always doing. This was always in Singer's DNA, but it's also an opportune time for them to really use that skill. They've been spending a century honing at that point, over a century honing at that point.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right around when my Singer sewing machine was getting made, mid-century, right? I've got the Centennial model, right?
51, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's when Exuberant, my machine that I mainly use for making buttonholes, that's when that was made, was right around there.
And Singer put a big deal into that whole Centennial thing. Why? Because now we're post-war. We got competition.
Right.
So, the Centennial, that's going to be a special edition, right? It's just got a different badge. There's nothing mechanically different about it.
Yeah, it's literally an 100-year-old design. It has been selling great for a century, and they're refreshing it with a badge.
Not a built-in clock.
It's better than a built-in clock.
But I just want to close here with saying that back to Brazil, I was saying I was selling Brazilian-made machines, the 6215 and the 6212 in the mid-1980s. And I was also selling machines made at the Japanese factory in the 1980s. The 14U52 and 14U64 sergers were made in the Japanese factory. They were the first Singer sergers, and they were really good. They were high quality. I bought one my third day of work. I'm like, oh yeah. But when you look at Singer numbers 14U52, the U stands for I can't remember how to say it, Yamanamaja factory in Japan. So, and Singer is still making machines there, not for here, for other places. I haven't quite figured out where Singer's making things now. When I was selling machines, the only two that were made in the U.S. were the top of the line, 6268 Ultra Unlimited, 6267, were made at the Anderson factory. Last one's made there in South Carolina. And then our midline ones were made at the Taiwan factory, and then the low mids were made in Brazil. And that was the low end at the time. So, pretty wild stuff. Globalism. Singer, the first globalist company. And we'll go into more of that with... Man, I got more stuff I want to talk about today, but we're already well over an hour.
Yeah, I was thinking, you told me what your list of topics was,
yeah.
But we've really put some time in on this. This was a big topic. This was a lot to digest.
And I want to talk about later issues about Janome and Juki, because that was a rabbit hole I got into here, and those are really high quality metal machines that are still made. I mean, Juki's, the more I learn about them, the more I'm like, I think when I buy a commercial machine again, I'm going to look into those. But we will talk more about that because this is an endless thread. Sewing machines in movies, in factories, in your house, they're everywhere. And most people don't even think about them. So we're going to post 2 pictures from that Brazilian movie. And anybody that can identify them, I mean, please write us and say, oh, yeah, that's whatever it is.
You win a prize of a sticker and our unending adoration.
Yeah, we'll say your name on the radio in Portuguese. How about that?
I will not promise that.
I'll give it a go. Oh, well, until next time, folks, stay threaded.
And there you have it, another section of Fabricating Consumers that we've picked through for the interesting bits that are relevant to how we use this podcast to understand our past and present, and also some other topics. We started in the 1980s in Brazil with an unexpected sewing machine being spotted in a movie about a radiation disaster. Don't forget that we gave you a quest in that section. You can check the show notes to be reminded of the specifics. In our second section, I was very confident that seamstress was code for sex worker, and sure enough, a touch of post-recording research turned up an article from the Seattle Met from 2022 that is all about how Lou Gramm was indeed a very successful brothel madam who rebuilt Seattle with sex work money. However, that article pushed back hard on the claim that those sex workers would often list their occupation as seamstress. That is traced to a single claim made by a guy who was collecting oral histories of the area and is not matched by any of the relevant court documents at the time, despite it being a load-bearing part of local tourist guide repertoire. Women just owned the fact that they were working as prostitutes, and Lou Gramm wasn't hiding what she did. I figure if it was part of the oral history of the area in the 1960s through 80s, then it probably has some basis in reality, but the lack of a strong reference in primary source documents does suggest that some degree of exaggeration has crept in along the way. Either way, I was gratified to find out that I was indeed reading between the lines correctly. And finally, we delved back into Fabricating Consumers, Chapter 6 this week, to learn about how Singer never regained lost ground after the conclusion of World War II in Japan. That part was so dense, I don't even know how to summarize it. I was amused by the Japanese manufacturers using such different methods to source their parts, and yet also matching or even exceeding the quality of the vertically integrated model. Just goes to show there's more than one way to succeed at capitalism. Also, I still definitely need to work on remembering to factor the Cold War into understanding how all of these economic outcomes connect. As a heads up, we're going to be traveling to inter my maternal grandma, who you have all heard about on the podcast many times. This means we won't be recording for a little bit, so I'm going to put up some rewinds into the feed while we're doing that. I think perhaps Fabricating Consumers Parts 1 and 2 might be appropriate. Sort of collect them all into one spot on the timeline, even if technically out of order. So don't be surprised about that when it comes up for the next 2 weeks. And we'll see you again once we're back from the family cemetery. As a reminder, we are unofficially sponsored by Stagecoach Road Vintage Sewing Machine. You can reach them at srvsew@gmail.com. Follow us on social media and YouTube. And you can best support us by sharing the podcast with your friends. You can even get ad-free episodes by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/used2sew. Thank you for listening to us here at Used to Sew. We always welcome your additions, corrections, and feedback in general. Please reach out to us via email at usedtosew@gmail.com. Used to Sew is a production of Fox and Raven Media. For more podcasts from Fox and Raven Media, visit our website at foxandravenmedia.com.